Hello, my name is Gabriel, and I'm doing this video out of concern. Um, this video is aimed at men specifically, and although people who are not men or who identify as more than just a man may also watch this, of course, and interpret my words, that's fine. But again, it is most pertinent to an audience or a viewer that identifies physically as a man. So like I was saying before, I'm doing this video out of concern. My main concern is religion and spirituality. I am a true monotheist and pure creationist. What this means, in short, is I believe in the practice of worshiping only one source that I refer to as God, strictly because I speak English. But if I'm speaking another language, like French, then I'll refer to it as Dieu. And if I'm speaking Arabic, I'll refer to it as Allah. And if I'm speaking another language, like Japanese, Kami-sama. If it's Punjabi, then I say Satnam. But either way, it's not the word or the description that matters within true monotheistic practice. In true monotheistic practice, the worshiper does not focus on words, does not give words as much importance as intention behind the practice. So what you're really doing inside when you're worshiping God. So again, true monotheism, pure creationism. So true monotheism means that you really do, as a worshiper, just dedicate yourself to observing one source. Basically, it's a catch-all. It's a way to turn away from any form of idolatry, any form of polytheism, because polytheism leads to idolatry. If you're choosing to split your worship and use these concepts to define what you worship, then it falls into, again, using words and putting the focus on words, which is not the main point of true monotheism. It's not about focusing on the words. It's about focusing on the intention and making that choice in a world where you are free to make any choice, where there's a lot of information. But I digress. True monotheism, pure creationism. So, pure creationism is another catch-all to basically turn away from the popular ideals and discourse of Darwinism and the theory of evolution, but also to turn away from the influences of modern media and technology that have such a strong hold on an individual's world perception. So if you think about it, as a person who has grown in front of a computer, basically, who has always been on the internet, who has always perhaps not been on the internet, for lack of a better word, rather engaged with the internet. Again, I digress. Pure creationism is a way to define how one must always look for the creationism in everyday life, in every moment. So there's thousands of examples that someone could give to describe pure creationism. So it's a lot of the times the religious discourse talks about how God created the world in 7 days. Now, I could extrapolate on that and talk about how that's talking about our calendar. 7 days, it's just a construct. It's at its core, it's a construct. And I don't mean to offend for anybody who thinks I'm saying it's nothing more than that, but we do have to look at it that way. We do have to dissect religions and understand what we're doing on a personal, individual level when we enter these institutions, when we enter these realms of thought, belief, and when we adopt these doctrines. So, like I was saying, God created the world in 7 days. Now, what I believe this does to most people is it gives the impression that God is inactive, that God created the world in 7 days and doesn't continue to exert his creative authority over the world constantly. So that's a creationist's point of view. A true, pure creationist's point of view is God never stops creating or destroying. That God is infinitely active and survives us. So evolution theories will talk about, survival of the fittest, while a creationist would say, I am something beyond my own comprehension as creation, as man. There are things that are beyond me, myself, that my worldview cannot encompass, everything, because my worldview is still subjective to my individual and personal bias. And I did not design this. I was designed this way. It is about understanding the true perspective for what it is, and thus recognizing that one is at the mercy of its own design, and that it is not the designer. It is not the original designer. And so we are able to recognize a creator, or we are able to have a solid reason to believe in a creator. So I'll leave it at that for now. I could talk about it for hours, days, weeks, but I digress. This video is made out of concern. My greatest concern is for my country, Canada. It's where I was born. It's my nationality. And my concern is the spiritual, political, and social infiltrations that I believe have been happening over the course of several years. I'm only 27 years old, so somebody who's older might have more experiences that are relevant to this notion of infiltration. But that would also, of course, bring into question, what is being infiltrated? And I would say what is being infiltrated and controlled is innocent people and children who are also ignorant and not being taught universal truth before they're being taught other things. Being taught some of the harder sciences, biology, chemistry, physics. Being taught about history. There's a lot of avenues. And I think that one of the things that shocks me the most is that these avenues are pursued by the curious mind, but the curious mind is not always operating from a basis of truth. So again, this video is for men because I'm a man, and one of the universal truths that I learned is that a man cannot define a woman in the sense that a man's understanding, a man's words, a man's consciousness cannot be detached from himself. So long as he is conscious, so long as he is aware, he speaks from that awareness, he speaks from that consciousness, and it is also bodily in nature. It's already all in one. In a lot of spiritual and philosophical discourse, people try to separate consciousness from body, but this is fallacy. You can't separate self-aware consciousness from body, because that's not what's actually happening in the present moment when that discourse is being propagated or occurring. So that's one universal truth, is that if a man starts to describe a woman's mind or a woman's behavior or anything personal to a woman, then he is forgetting that universal truth. And I would be inclined to say the same for the other sex, but then I'd be contradicting what I just said, right? So the reason I bring that up is because as a true monotheist, I'm quite limited in my choices of which religion is most relevant and most in line with my beliefs. But the reason I bring that up is because I found that a lot of Abrahamic doctrines appropriate the woman within their religion. And I'm sure anybody can come up with examples that we see constantly. So as a true monotheist, one thing that I am strongly opposed to within Abrahamic religions of today and other monotheistic religions is for men within those religions to describe women. I believe in the spiritual autonomy of a man, and I believe in the spiritual autonomy of a woman. I believe when it comes down to the very core of one's being, the truth is that they are separate. But one cause for concern that I do have is one of the soul. What is the soul? So yeah. So that's one universal truth that I found that is not taught. We're not teaching people to think or act from a basis of truth. We are free to think and act from a basis of belief, from a basis of founded or unfounded knowledge, science, pseudoscience, but still, even our methods of everyday or common communication do not necessarily take universal truth into consideration. And I myself am still trying to perfect this newfound practice based on universal truth. Of course, Abrahamic religions have a strong influence on me and perhaps others when it comes to prophecies, concepts being described. Regardless, I digress yet again. The point is to try and use logic and reasoning and newfound truth to see the value and maybe even the necessity of worship. So earlier in the video I was talking about how a person can come to realize certain universal truths. And for example, a baby is born, right? But it's not conscious at birth. Or is it? You know, we can't escape our own subjective understanding of consciousness because the barrier is self. That's the barrier. That's our bias. That's how we're created. So we do rely on our own interpretations. So the question of consciousness and intelligence itself is one that can only be observed and not measured. But universal truth points to some consistencies. So like I was saying, a baby is born, and then it becomes conscious later. And that's when I would argue self is born. Self begins. It doesn't begin at birth, necessarily. It begins a few years after birth. And that's when the true self starts to become self-aware of its own body, of its own understandings, starts to accumulate memories, and develop. So, aside from that truth that I also found, because oftentimes discourse, whether it's scientific, religious, theological, or philosophical, often takes other things into consideration that are not based on truth, such as events describing the past or even parents and family trying to talk about an individual's past, trying to take the narrative of the individual, and that the individual reserves the right to hold a certain level of skepticism, because they're not trying to undermine somebody else's word. They're simply operating from a newfound basis of truth. So when one realizes that they are created, when they really understand pure creationism, then they see the necessity of worship. They learn to properly fear not themselves, but rather whatever the force was that brought them into being. So an individual is born, and every day they wake up in the same body. That's a consistency that one can use to measure their understanding of reality. So when we come to those very elementary concepts, those very foundational concepts of existence, and individuality, I wake up every day in the same body. Do I choose to? No. It's not my choice. I am who I am. And there could be a reason for that. So one thing is certain is that this natural force, this force, it doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't negotiate with me every time I go to sleep. No, there is no choice involved. No personal choice involved. Every day, I wake up in the same body. And I think that's being overlooked when it comes to people trying to explain truth and people trying to explain the pertinence of truth in a world that is largely basing its opinions off of belief or fact. Still comes down to a level of trust and faith in sources beyond self. So, infiltration. Specifically spiritual infiltration, I would say that there is discourse happening in this country and abroad that is encouraging people to explore perceptions and philosophies that bring them beyond their natural bodies. Perhaps people have already heard of things like astral projection. They've heard of things like out-of-body experiences. Maybe they've followed a discourse or a narrative of their consciousness being able to go beyond their body. Maybe they talk about lucid dreaming. How I see it is that it's a choice. But it's also concerning because people might still be ignorant. They weren't operating on a basis of truth when they started to engage with that discourse. When they went into a temple, when they went into a yoga studio, when they spoke to a professor, when they went to university, when they went to school, when they spoke to a friend, when they talked to somebody online, they weren't perhaps operating from a basis of truth before their curiosity got the best of them and they started exploring these materials, such as astral projection, lucid dreaming, and everything else I mentioned previously. Maybe in many ways we're conditioned to pursue happiness instead of pursuing truth. So that is a huge part of my concern and why I'm doing this video. I could talk about a lot of personal experiences that I've had where I felt that people were trying to manipulate me, hypnotize me, take advantage of my ignorance at the time, reach for something that they could see that was purely mine, like myself, my sense of self, my psyche, being intact, and using certain methods to seduce me or to trick me into another state of mind. So Western yoga enthusiasts, with their pseudoscience, their mixed theories, with mixed mythologies, mixed cultures, people that call themselves co-creators of their own realities, believing that they have the power to make manifest what they desire. These are all things that I have seen people talk about and believe. And it's concerning. Because truth tells me that there is a lack of certainty when walking down that road. One thing in particular that bothers me when I've had these experiences is seeing that people take away value from self and take away value from body. I've been a witness to, excuse me, I've been a witness to a lot of what appears to be forms of self-hatred, deep self-hatred, that people in these spiritual discourses and these perhaps even cults or religions are encouraged to discard the notion of self, discard the notion of body, discard any idea that is individual or promotes individuality, in favor of this idea of joining oneself to a greater form of consciousness. And I think that this is incredibly dangerous and damaging to one's initial sense of self, reality, and to recognize self within reality, that the body does serve as an anchor, that the ego and the individual does serve as an anchor from which one can base itself off in order to assess and comprehend events that unfold around them and also personal experiences. So, my greatest cause for concern here is the appropriation of the individual within the world, the appropriation of their worldview, and also the exploitation of their body through sex, as well as other things like substances and substance abuse that can range from medication to recreational substances and even food. To be aware of the most basic principle. which is you're putting something in your body. And there might be an intention behind that. And you even have large groups of people that promote or propagate the idea or the concept behind specific substances, specific foods. And that these people might have their own ideals, might have their own doctrines, but that the individual, in light of all of this, reserves the right to protect their bodily and spiritual autonomy upon realizing the truth about their individuality. So at the end of the day, I think that a lot of us will simply move forward with our beliefs and our preoccupations, regardless of what others do. So the purpose of this video really is just to try and reach out to other men and let them know, like, I am a seriously concerned individual. I don't want you to do yoga. I don't want you to put your trust or your faith in somebody else just because you feel you don't have enough answers. People might be pressuring you to see a therapist or a doctor, and they might not be operating on a basis of truth. You know, they might have different religious views. You know, as a Canadian, I'm looking at this whole thing, and Canada is home to many diverse cultures and religions. And although the ideal might be to promote all of them equally, I still feel like we are so far away from that reality. I believe that a lot of people from anywhere have been appropriating their newfound ecstasies or experiments with foreign and native practices. By native, I mean here, home practices. I'm not trying to start a political argument here. I'm just trying to say that Canadians have access to a lot of information. But are still limited in many ways. And I think that youth and innocent people and ignorant people need to be protected. That maybe there are people out there, men and women, who have already, you know, expanded their consciousness, you know, chosen to turn away from their original natural creation that was created for them. Remember, something intended for you to be an individual. And so you have chosen to turn away from that initial perspective and reality and potentially move towards the dissolution of self into some greater whole, which I believe leads to the destruction of the soul. I believe that I have a really good understanding of what the soul is. And I do believe that I can speak on behalf of men who are true monotheists, pure creationists, and that many of my views are compatible with Abrahamic religions such as Christianity and Islam. Although we still have our differences, I do believe that there is still a common goal, which is to protect the integrity of the original individual creation that is experienced in self and recognized in others. So again, don't do yoga. Don't, if you're a man, don't let women decide your health, you know, unless you have some kind of contract with a woman. But I would advise you to get out of that contract. You know, because I am a staunch believer that a woman's spirituality is not a man's spirituality. And that a man's health is a man's health. And a man's spirit is a man's spirit. And that, you know, I think that when it comes to other things like school and community, okay, no problem. Everybody is welcome, ideally. But when it comes down to spirituality and notions of the soul and concepts revolving around the individual trying to navigate his own worldview and make choices, I think that it's really important that he protects his sense of self. Yeah. And a lot of the times, you know, when I say don't do yoga, what I'm really concerned about is these things that I see on social media everywhere. You know, Kundalini, you know. I'll be the first to say that I see absolutely no problem with recreational copulation. I don't see a problem with that. I don't see a problem with people seeking company, seeking romance, intimacy. I think that as long as both parties are honest and they're like, we're doing this for mutual pleasure, that's it. And, you know, if a relationship ensues, then that happens. But I think that the fact that there's actually like media out there that is saying like, you know, open your third eye and access your kundalini and, you know, like really open yourself to somebody else, I think is very dangerous. I think that this is a common form of spiritual entrapment, that these are predators. These people, I believe, have the power to cause affliction. That, you know, perhaps the reason why Abrahamic religions appropriate things like marriage and the joining of two bodies is because perhaps, maybe, they were aware of the problems that can arise with the dissolution of self into a greater whole. That at the end of the day, I'm concerned for innocent individuals that were trapped, that are victims of these kinds of things, that they deserve to be able to operate from a basis of truth and memory of their original creation, their original self. And again, I'm not speaking so much from experience as much as I am speaking from having experiences where I believe I have come into contact with people who have dissolved their sense of self and do serve a greater whole. Basically, the idea that there are people that do wake up in different bodies, that they believe that they have joined a specific godhead. The real danger of cults, the real danger of manipulation, the real danger of spiritual entrapment and domination, the real dangers of being seduced not just into intimacy, but the dangers of being seduced into a false sense of divinity. So this video has gone on for a little while. I'm going to try and talk about these things some more and do what I can. To be a voice for true monotheism, pure creationism, and hope that these people that I'm reaching out to, these men that I'm reaching out to, know that I see things in a specific way when it comes to this. That the idea that an innocent man that just was on the pursuit of happiness like anyone else gets involved with yoga, thinks it's healthy, starts adopting practices that he believes are good for him, and trusting these people. You know, this is, I think, a common story for a lot of youth out there. And I'm absolutely heartbroken that I had to find this basis of truth by myself. That no one came to me and tried to explain these dangers to me. When I went in that yoga studio, no one told me that might be the wrong choice, you know? And no one came to me and tried to talk to me about the truth. No one came to me on the basis of truth. Everyone came to me on the basis of belief. I didn't have a single individual come to me on the basis of truth to explain the truth of who I am as an individual, who I am as a self-aware man. And so that's another reason why I'm creating this video, is hopefully, I am addressing you as a self-aware man on the basis of truth, and that there are foundational concepts and understandings that need to be focused on in order to start operating and communicating from a basis of truth rather than a basis of belief and a basis of doctrines. With that being said, based on some personal and physical experiences I have had, I do believe that these practices are dangerous. Kundalini, yoga, deep meditation in a room full of strangers, people that have the ability to scan one's psyche, people that permit themselves to go beyond the borders of their own bodies and into the bodies of others. You know, I could talk about it for weeks, but that's why I'm concerned, and that's why I'm trying to reach out to people and to youth, you know, and hoping that this message potentially inspires others to reach out to youth and to reach out to the ignorant and let them know that you just want to empower them. You want them to be critical thinkers. I want you to be a critical thinker. I want you to operate from a basis of truth before you make decisions that affect your own personal beliefs and doctrine. Before you go, you know, and make decisions that could impact you in a very personal way that are hard to reverse. You know, we should be promoting truthful perspectives, respecting individuality, and we should be addressing these doctrines that say, you know, open your third eye, you know, do these techniques and you'll be, you know, rich, or you'll find true love. You know, these are dangerous, and they're destructive, and they're not good. And I say that in that tone of voice because it breaks my heart to think of all of the innocent men that have fallen into these awful traps and have been exploited when all they wanted was to be happy. They were just following their nature, and these predators and these people hiding in studios and spreading their own religious dogma, pseudo-religious dogma and spiritual dogma, and, you know, just being absolutely selfish. Telling somebody that they need to let go of ego, telling somebody that they're actually progressing, you know, as they detach themselves from what they were before, you know, playing mind games. So again, that's my concern. And hopefully I do more videos in the future. My name is Gabriel, and I am a true monotheist, pure creationist, and I am concerned with the spiritual state of Canada, its organizations, its private sector, its education, as well as all of these sectors and bodies abroad. Thank you for watching.